I just want to say to many of you who have reached out to me via phone, email, and social media to thank me for doing these virtual tour series. I truly appreciate it, and it warms my heart to know that these presentations are valued and we're making a difference in the lives of so many people. So thank you again. I want to share a little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Mara Walsh, and I am in the United States, specifically between Philadelphia and New York. I started leading physical tours with EF Tours as a Girl Scout leader, taking girls and their families to international destinations every summer. I've since expanded my physical travel program. Now I also lead adult-only tours with EF Go Ahead Tours, as well as some other group organizational companies. I also offer family-friendly tours. And as a certified travel agent, I can also book you on your dream trip as part of a group or on your own. So just reach out to me if you're starting to think about physical travel and let me know where you want to go, and I'll help you get there. In terms of the virtual tours, there are a couple reasons why I started this series. The primary reason is I really wanted to support the tour director community during this time of travel restrictions where they have not been able to work. And I really wanted to keep the excitement of travel alive for my travel group and extend that opportunity to those of you who have learned about us through your friends, your family, social media, and other means. So welcome. We've done more than 30 tours in the last year since COVID struck. Who would have thought that we would still be in the midst of this pandemic at this time? If you would like to access any of the recordings, they are all available on my website, girltraveltours.com. There's a virtual tours drop-down menu where you can access all of the tours. You can also access them on Facebook or on YouTube. So we have several more tours planned for the coming year, and I wanted to review them with you so that you can schedule accordingly. We have coming up next Andalusia, Mexico, Jerusalem, Belgium, Portugal. We have a mystery on the Danube river cruise, the south of France, ancient Rome, Sydney, Australia, Wales and Cornwall, the Taj Mahal, Venice, Western Scotland, and so much more. We're in the midst of planning more for the summer months and going into the fall. As long as you're interested in viewing these virtual tour presentations, I will continue to produce them with my friends and tour directors all over the world. I know many of you have found us through the virtual world of Facebook, and thank you very much for joining us on Facebook now. We are streaming live. I just wanted to send out a warning regarding the scammers on Facebook. There's several relentlessly unscrupulous people on Facebook who try to promote fake pages and events. They copy things exactly using my photo, my website, my name, my pictures. But their whole reason in doing this is to link to a site where you have to provide a credit card. Please never, ever, ever give a credit card to enter a free virtual event. If you choose to provide a credit card for a tip later on, that's your prerogative. But to enter a free virtual event, you should not have to provide a credit card. My virtual tour presentations do not require credit cards to enter, and you can always safely access them through my website if you're not comfortable accessing them through Facebook. Again, it's girltraveltours.com. So now that we've kind of talked that through, I want to get on with the program. But before we get going, I want to share with you a few ways you can interact with us during the event. If you're on Facebook, you know that you can use the feed and you can enter anything in there. I'm actually monitoring both Facebook and Zoom, so we will try our best to address both feeds. If you're on Zoom, feel free to use the chat mechanism to communicate with me throughout the presentation. If you want to put a question up that you want answered at the end of the presentation, that should be listed in the Q&A tab. So those questions are saved for the tour guides as well as me to physically answer live at the end of the event. Okay, so the other thing I like to do to interact with everybody on the Zoom world is I like to throw a poll up there. It gives us an opportunity to know what your connection is with the region that we're visiting. Today, we are visiting Antarctica. So let's put it up there and have everybody answer, and feel free to answer in the chat or on the Facebook feed. What is your connection to Antarctica? I've been and love it. I have a trip booked. I plan to go in the future. I have no set plans, but I'm interested in the location, or I am solely interested in experiencing it virtually. I'm going to let this go a little bit so that our attendees can enter their answers. I will tell you that I have plans to go in the future. In 2025, I am taking a group to Antarctica. So if this presentation should move you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and get on our group to go to Antarctica in 2025. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results with you. And as we see, the majority of people, which is almost 50%, have no set plans, but they're interested in the location. Let's hope we change that by the time we get finished this presentation and you move your answers up to I plan to go in the future. I'm going to exit the poll right now. If you still see it on your screen, you can hit the red arrow, the little red button on the top left to get the poll screen out of your viewing. As I said, today's tour is to Antarctica, and I am so excited because of my real life tour that I have scheduled for 2025. I'm just thrilled to be able to get to this region. So if you have the same desire that I do, please reach out to me afterwards through email or any other means. You could do it through my website or email. And as we all know, a tour would not be complete without a fantastic tour director. And tonight we are lucky enough to have two. A tour director is like a personal travel concierge who stays with your group from start to finish, shares a world of knowledge, manages all your travel plans, and makes sure that your experience is full of education, is stressless, and it's easy to navigate. These tour guides and tour directors are by far the most important people in our group. And if we are not traveling, these tour directors have not been working. And as we all know now, this has been more than a year coming. So there's been a very long dry spell. I will share with you in the chat and in the Q&A how you can tip the tour director if you are so inclined. All of the tips go directly to the guides once collected, minus the Zoom and operating expenses. I'm hoping that this virtual tour will not only keep our desire to travel alive, but also allow a tour director, in this case, two tour directors, to do what they do best, which is share their knowledge and passion for travel. Today, we're set to have a 90-minute presentation followed by a Q&A. We are lucky to have with us the dynamic duo of guides who are very fortunate to spend their time taking people to explore the last continent. Laura and Carlos are super passionate about Antarctica and can't wait to share it with all of us. So I think, Laura, you may be the first one to jump in here. So if you are ready, you guys can unmute yourself and you can take the controls.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Mara, so much for giving us this chance to do what we love so much and to share with you this place that is unique and that we've been experiencing for some years. So before we start, I would like to share with you our screen. Let's do this. Just give us a few seconds. Okay, let me. Okay. Can you see now?
You're ready to roll. You are ready
Great.
to roll.
Perfect. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is Laura or Laura, and he's Carlos. We are a couple. I am originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina, but I moved down south many years ago, and I lived for 15 years in Ushuaia, that is known as a city at the end of the world. I worked there as a local guide and also as a tour leader or tour director, doing different trips in the southern region that is called Patagonia and of course, Antarctica. And now we are currently living in Santiago de Chile.
Hi, everyone. That's where I'm from, originally born and raised in Santiago, Chile. That's where we are right now. We're really excited to share this wonderful destination in our planet. For us, is the best place on Earth. And a little bit of myself. I've been guiding all through Antarctica and Patagonia, mainly national parks. I'm a naturalist guide, and for the last 20 years. And so again, I'm married to this beautiful, sweet young woman right here. So, and we are currently living in Santiago, and we hope you enjoy. So bundle up because we're traveling south.
So we wanted to share with you that we have lots of pictures and videos. We hope you like this collection that we are about to show you right now, because it was very hard to choose like the nicest ones. We also want to clarify that this does not intend to be a scientific lecture, because of course nowadays everybody can easily Google everything. So the idea for our Antarctica Through Our Eyes tour is to share some general facts and info on Antarctica, but also to share with you the Antarctica that we've seen through many summers, Southern Hemisphere summers, and also to tell you a bit about how a trip is like. So we are ready to start sharing Antarctica with you, and also you will see our emojis. They will appear in several slides. So I want to start with some maps. You can clearly see where Antarctica is, but we were telling you that we are from Argentina and Chile. So I just highlighted our countries. We live at the bottom of the world, as you can see on this map. But I also highlighted the bottom part of our countries. If you can have a look at that latitude all around the globe, we can easily sail from Argentina, go around the globe, and end up in Chile. With this, I'm trying to tell you that there's no other land mass at our latitude than just our two countries, and then Antarctica. Now, on this other map, you can see the Antarctic Circle, which is located at 66 degrees south of latitude. Same in the north, the Arctic Circle. But I want to first point out where Ushuaia city is. That's a place where I lived for a long time, the end of the world, location 54 degrees south. And just to give you an idea, there are some other places like Grytviken in South Georgia and Stewart Island that belongs to New Zealand, more or less at the same latitude in the south. But what happens in the north? I was trying to look for some cities that can be located at the same latitude, but in the north. And this is what I found. Grand Prairie in Alberta, Canada, Belfast in Northern Ireland, and Hamburg in Germany. All of them same latitude, but in the north. But what happens if we go from our side of the world way down south? We would just see the ocean and then Antarctica. But from those cities in the north, if you want to go farther north, there are more cities, famous ones like Fairbanks in Alaska, Reykjavik in Iceland, and Tromsø in Norway. All of them are located pretty close to the Arctic Circle latitude. So what I'm saying is that there are more cities or towns closer to the North Pole than we are from the South Pole. That's Antarctica. And on this third map, I think you can clearly see or have an idea about distances. That's how close we can say the bottom part of Argentina and Chile are to the Antarctic Peninsula. And if you have a look all around the globe, from South Africa, from Australia, from New Zealand, the distance is almost the double than ours. So let's check some of the facts and info on Antarctica. It is the biggest mass of ice in the world. And in some parts, the ice can be up to 3 miles thick. The size of the continent, it's equal to 1.5 times the size of the US. And the continent contains the 90% of the freshwater ice that it's on our planet Earth, and also the 70% of the fresh water, so important for the world right now. When we define Antarctica, we say that it's the coldest, windiest, driest, and highest continent. And now we'll give you some more info about each of these facts. First one, world's most extreme desert. I think this is hard to believe because when we picture a desert, the first idea that comes to our minds is a sand dune, very dry and just sand. But the definition of a desert is just any place that gets very little precipitation. And this applies to Antarctica. The picture you see corresponds to a place that is called the dry valleys of Antarctica. And on that little map up on the right, you can see the location of the dry valleys, which are very close to a very famous US research station called McMurdo. As you can read down below, some of the inner regions of the continent receive an average of 2 inches, only 2 inches of rain or precipitation per year. And if we can make a comparison with the Sahara Desert, famous one, that place receives twice as much rain each year. 97% of Antarctica, it's covered with ice, and this dry valley section that I'm telling you about corresponds to the 3% of it without ice. Then Antarctica is the highest continent on Earth. This is when we talk about the highest average elevation of all continents, and that's equal to 8,200 feet. Most of the continent is higher than 9,900 feet. One thing I want to tell you is that we will be using feet or like US system, but you will always find between brackets the metric system in case you want to do the conversion. So most of the continent is higher than 9,900 feet above sea level, but that's exclusively because of the presence of the ice. Without that ice, maybe Antarctica would be one of the lowest continents on Earth. The picture you see, it's Mount Vinson. It's the Antarctica's highest summit with a bit more than 16,000 feet. And you can see on the map the location of Mount Vinson as well.
All right. We said that Antarctica is the coldest continent on our planet. And this is a really beautiful picture, a satellite picture that shows one interesting feature that Antarctica has, and that is to grow in twice its size during the winter time. So we need to keep in mind that during the entire winter in the southern hemisphere, Antarctica has no exposure whatsoever to sunlight. And that's that's when precisely it grows, as you can see, twice its size in the winter. And the coldest continent has been seriously affected by the climate change, without a doubt. One thing we want to mention before we go on and talk about some winter in last year, 2020, and the summer as well, is that the coldest ever land temperature recorded was in Antarctica, took place in Antarctica, and it reached a minus 128.6 Fahrenheit, equivalent to minus 89.2. Really hard to picture those numbers into your mind. But we want to also mention that because of the climate change, unfortunately both winter and summer 2020 last year, they set records. So the winter 2020 is set to be the third hottest since ever registered, and also the summer 2020 reached a high temperature, the incredible temperature of 69.35 Fahrenheit degrees, almost 21 Celsius degrees. Coincidentally, Laura and myself, we were there on the very same day on February 9th, 2020. So that's not really good news for Antarctica from that side. Now, when we refer to Antarctica, we also have to mention that Antarctica is the windiest place on Earth. There are many places, very windy places in our planet, definitely. But when you go to Antarctica, mainly in the interior of the Antarctic continent, you get very well exposed to the so-called katabatic winds that can reach speeds of 200 miles or 320 kilometers per hour. And they're basically katabatic is actually a Greek word that refers to winds that flow down the coastal slopes under the influence of gravity, carrying very little moisture, and that impedes actually the ice to be formed in certain parts of Antarctica that Laura referred in the previous slide. Now, this is a very frequently asked question: is how about regulations, how everything it's managed in Antarctica? And we need to go back in time. In 1959, to be more precise, the so-called Antarctic Treaty was signed, and setting an unprecedented international agreement to govern the continent together as a reserve for peace and science. Now, the very first 12 signatory countries are represented on those flags in the inner circle in the middle of the continent in that picture. among which you may, of course, count Chile, Argentina, and also the United States. Ever since 1959, more than 41 countries have actually signed the treaty, and which basically regulates the international relations between all countries to support scientific operation on the ice. Now, if you're going to go become a visitor to Antarctica, let's just talk about how is tourism managed in the wide continent. So we're going to read to you what we think are the most important aspects of the legal framework every visitor to Antarctica should actually acknowledge. So it begins like this. Since the beginning of the modern Antarctic travel industry in 1960s, the number of visitors to Antarctica has grown from a few hundred to more than 50,000 each year. IATO, which stands for International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, is an international organization comprised of more than 100 respected companies and organizations from across the world and was founded in 1991. Their mission is to advocate and promote the practice of safe and environmentally responsible private sector travel to the Antarctic. In 1991, the Antarctic Treaty consultative parties adopted the Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty, which designates the Antarctic as a natural reserve. The environmental protocol applies to tourism and non-governmental activities, as well as governmental activities in the Antarctic Treaty area. It is intended to ensure that these activities do not have adverse impact on the Antarctic environment or on its scientific and aesthetic values.
So there's a document that is called Guidance for Visitors to the Antarctic. We'll share part of this with you thanks to Mara after our presentation. So this document intends to ensure that all visitors are aware of and are therefore able to comply with the treaty and the protocol. Visitors are, of course, bound by national laws and regulations applicable to activities in the Antarctic. That's what you need to know before going there. Now, when we are already on the ship, on any ship, there's a mandatory attendance to an IATO briefing. All ships share with travelers this information. And apart from attending that briefing, we do what we call the boot and clothing decontamination procedure. We basically vacuum clean all our outer layers that we plan to wear when we go ashore. And also we clean and disinfect boots and, for example, trekking poles. So after we do this procedure, each traveler needs to sign a biosecurity declaration. That's when we are on our way to Antarctica. And then among all the different rules that we need to follow, the most important one I would say is the distance we need to keep from wildlife. So the general rule is at least 15 feet away from wildlife. There are some exceptions when we need to keep a longer distance, and that's for example, fur seals or jousting elephant seals. Now that we gave you some official information, I would like to share with you some of these curiosities. So the first one is that there's no Antarctic time zone. As you know, our world is divided into these longitude lines that they define the different time zones for the different parts of the world. But all these lines, they meet down at a single point where the South Pole is. So no Antarctic time zone. In general, people ask us like, what's the time that we'll be using in Antarctica? And the answer is we keep the time from the place where we are departing from. In our case, we depart from Argentina. That's the time that we keep for the duration of the trip. Now, you have to consider that there are several research stations in Antarctica. Some of them can be located pretty close to each other, and they can be from different countries. So they should agree in which is the time they use in case they have to share some meetings or activities. Then the bottom left map shows Antarctica as the confusing continent. And that's because if we are standing at the South Pole, whichever direction we have a look, it's always north from where we are standing. Then that picture of the cute baby, which is the same person that you see dressed with that orange jacket, is Emilio Marcos Palma. He's from Argentina, and he was the first baby to be born in Antarctica. The first one of 11 babies that were born between the end of the 70s and beginning of the 80s, all of them from Argentina and Chile. In the case of Argentina, the country was living under a dictatorship. So the crazy person that was in charge of the country in those years, basically it was 1978 when this took place, he decided to send a pregnant woman to Antarctica, believing that Argentina would increase the chances to claim the portion of Antarctica because we were delivering a baby. Crazy idea. It wasn't safe for babies and mothers. So it was just a period. It's over. And no more babies are born in Antarctica, except for wildlife babies, of course. And then the last part of this slide shows these cute and popular Madagascar penguins from the movie. And it's because I have a question for you. How many penguins do you believe that are living in Antarctica? There's a person who dedicated the past 2 decades to count penguins, and he came up with this number: 12 million penguins in Antarctica. Not one more, not one less. That's the number. Now, a few things to bear in mind if you're planning to go to Antarctica. The first one is that every trip is different and it's always a unique experience. I'm telling you this because now we will share pictures and photos, videos with you, and maybe you have friends or relatives who have been there. And if you go to Antarctica expecting to find the same things that your friends saw when they were there, you are wrong. You have to lower down your expectations and let Antarctica surprise you. About the duration of the trip that is called like classic or conventional Antarctica takes from 9 to 11 days round trip from the city of Ushuaia. Then some companies can offer a longer trip that includes not only the Antarctic Peninsula, because the classic Antarctica is only the peninsula, but these other trips can also include South Georgia Islands and Malvinas or Falklands. So those longer trips can take from 18 up to 23 days. The size of the ship. With this, I'm talking about the capacity, the number of travelers that will be on board. You have to know that one important rule when we visit Antarctica is that you cannot have more than 100 people ashore at a time. So if you are on a ship that is less than 100 travelers, which is not so easy to find, there are less and less of these ships, then you can all go at the same time to visit one area. If you are on a ship that is between 100 and 500, you are able to get off, but you will have to take turns. So sometimes you can stay longer in one area so that we can manage to take every single person ashore. If the ship you are on is more than 500 passengers, they can sail through Antarctica, but you cannot get off at all. So some things to consider when you decide to plan a trip to Antarctica. And one of the most frequently asked questions that we get is, what's the best season to go? If this question is related with weather, we can never guess. The season when we go, it's the Southern Hemisphere summer. It's a very short season. Some companies start in November all the way through March. So we go in our summer because there's less ice and less cold, of course. So that's what I can say about weather. Then if you are thinking about, maybe you are a photographer and you want to take, a specific photo about, for example, penguins, then you can pick a certain departure or a certain part of the season, because if you will go really early, you will maybe see the mating of penguins and maybe eggs or the little chicks. Or if you go at the end of the season, you will see that those chicks that were born in the season are as big as their parents. I told you about the different trips. So the map that is on the left is the one that shows the Antarctic Peninsula, and also farther north, what it's called the South Shetland Islands. So this is what it's called the classic Antarctica trip. We basically cover the west side of the peninsula and South Shetland Islands. The map you see on the right, it's the one I told you that can be longer, including Malvinas or Falkland Islands and South Georgia Island as well. Now, I mentioned this word before, Ushuaia or Ushuaia. This is in Argentina. It's part of Tierra del Fuego province and island. That's where I lived for many years. It's known as the end of the world, and it's considered to be the gateway to Antarctica. You can read some names of cities that they are all in the Southern Hemisphere, and all of them can be considered to be close to Antarctica. But because of its location, Ushuaia in Argentina is number one, is the closest city, 600 miles to get from Ushuaia to the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. But it's not just that we were lucky because of the location. We worked hard to have all the infrastructure that is needed to receive the people before they go to Antarctica. So apart from having a port, we do have an international airport, hotels where you can stay before or after the trip. The ships can get refueled, and also the companies can get the food supplies that they might need during the whole season, because as soon as you leave the port, there are no grocery stores that you will find halfway through.
All right, so now we are all in Ushuaia, very excited, ready to depart, and we get on board the ship. Sometime around, say 6, 7 o'clock, we were ready to set sail. And soon after 4, maybe 5 hours average, after the navigation of the Beagle Channel, you're going to be out and open to the Drake Passage. And this is the huge body of water that actually puts together the two largest oceans on our planet, the Pacific and the Atlantic together, along with the Antarctic Sea as well, down at the bottom. So that's what lies in the middle. The Drake Passage it's either famous or infamous because people really suffer and get sick, especially if you're not used to navigate. And how long does it take to reach Antarctica anyway? So that is the question that everybody asks. And anytime between 36 to 48 hours. So in other words, between a day and a half to 2 days, day and a half, if you are extremely lucky and you actually don't get high waves. And people ask us, it's going to be a lake drake, or is it going to be a rather shake drake? So let's just check this out. We got a little video here that I actually took myself from the navigation bridge. From this particular ship. And this is equivalent to a 5-story building. So it's pretty high up. And yet you hit heat waves that goes from 18 to 25 foot waves. Between 18 to 25 foot. And winds that are about 34 to 40 knots. This is all measured in a wind scale called Beaufort. It goes from 1 to 12, being 12 hurricane forces. So this is force 8. So force 8 is what you more or less encounter. But people always ask us, is it always like this? Is it always really shaky? Well, not always. Unbelievably, we managed to make a video of the same spot. This is the Drake Passage. It's the same place. It's really unbelievable. And it looks like almost no ripples in the water there. There's no wind, and even for the captain and the crew, it was a show. And they came out on deck to video this, to take pictures, because it rarely happens. I've actually experienced the crossing of the Drake myself 60 times, 60, in my life over the past 13 years, and I've only encountered these calm seas twice. So it's really, truly a rare occurrence. But is there anything to see when crossing the Drake, or is it just water? Well, believe it or not, yes, there is more than a couple of things to see. You want to be out there. You want to start, getting the feeling of the explorers, what was like to be out there in the middle of the ocean. And the first companion you have are the birds. So there is a flock of birds. So these are the Cape petrels, but undoubtedly the king of the seas is the wandering albatross. My favorite bird. I just totally love this bird. Even if you're not much into birding, you become addicted to and learn so fast and so much from the expedition staff. And how to recognize them, for instance, in flight and so on. The wingspan of the wandering albatross reaches 11 feet. This is by far the largest flying bird on Earth. It's a pelagic bird. That means that 80% of their life is actually spent out in the open ocean, eating and resting as well. And the other 20%, they touch land to breed and molt, basically. They can reach and fly distances of about 500 miles per day and 75,000 miles in a year. And they can actually circumnavigate the entire continent up to 3 times in 1 year. That's really a remarkable bird.
Now, we crossed the Drake Passage already, so if you are not feeling sick, I want to tell you about the 5 components that create a unique Antarctic experience. Almost, I would say, every company going to Antarctica tries to put together a number of activities for travelers to fully enjoy Antarctica. Of course, there can be some optional activities, but this is what the majority of the companies do. So wildlife viewing from decks is number 1. This is not just when we are crossing the Drake Passage, as Carlos was telling you, but also when we are in Antarctica. So what happens? We always ask the people to be ready, to have cameras, binoculars, and jackets ready in case we make an announcement and something's going on outside. So in some opportunities, the captain let us stay in areas that they normally remain closed, like the stern of the ship. So for sure, when this happens and you see almost every single person outside, is because we are doing some whale watching. But some other times when we are watching whales, some birds, they can get pretty close, so you can take some great shots of these birds. Then lectures. There are staff members that they are naturalists, and they also drive the Zodiacs to take us ashore. So they schedule a number of lectures for those days when we are crossing the Drake Passage both ways. The idea on our way south is that we can give you all the information, educate the travelers, so by the time we get to Antarctica, you fully dedicate the time that you have there. Now, a very special moment was this day when we were talking about birds. You can see 3 of our staff members, expedition staff members, holding an albatross, a wandering albatross, real size, made of fabric. Carlos already mentioned that that's his favorite bird. So these are made by a lady from Europe that he met a while ago. And he asked her to ship that bird to our house from Europe to Chile. This means that now that huge albatross is hanging from the wall in our house. So we always say hi to that bird, and we can never forget about Antarctica, of course.
All right, so we're gonna basically say something that might sound pretty obvious. We are all in a ship, and we do encourage everyone to spend as much time as possible out on deck in order to bring Antarctica to you, closer to you, to your heart, to your senses. So through these short time-lapse video, we want to share with you one of the most scenic passages. This is the so-called Lemaire Channel with beautiful mountain peaks on both sides. And again, these are some of the things that you truly enjoy. There's a nice picture of one staff member and the travelers. And also, you can better appreciate and have a better understanding about the scale of Antarctica. The magnitude of this continent really blows your mind. And so you yourself right there in front of that enormous iceberg, it's something totally indescribable. And that's why we encourage everyone to be out there as much as possible. Now, from the times of the world famous French scientist, Jacques Cousteau, he is the one pretty much that made the zodiac popular. Zodiac is the name, the trademark for these maneuverable inflatable rubber boats that are actually really lightweight, and they are a key component when it comes to bringing travelers to Antarctica, closer to Antarctica, because it provides a whole different perspective. You're not looking everything from up above, from like if you were from the outside decks of the ship. But look at this, for instance. There's a patch of pack ice right there, and on top you have several seals resting, and you get also the opportunity to photograph up close some of the small colonies of penguins, and keeping the distance needed anyways. You do need binoculars and also good camera lenses to photographs to get pictures like this. For instance, this is one of my favorite pictures, and that's me back in yellow over there. And this is a leopard seal resting up on an ice floe. We keep the distance, and obviously, as long as it is safe, we truly encourage sometimes our drivers to turn off the engine just for a few moments, and then encourage everyone else to stop taking pictures, stop clicking, just put your cameras down just for a while and let Antarctica speak to you. And the silence is so profound that it's impossible that it doesn't hit you, it deepen your heart and your soul.
So after zodiac tours, landings are probably what people get to do when they go to Antarctica. So this is the time when we take the people ashore. You have to know that IATO, this international organization of Antarctic tour operators, they do have a list of about 50 sites where we can go to make these landings. So there can be more than one ship at a time per site. This means that sometimes to work on the calendar for every season, it's a big challenge for companies. And also, we really depend on ice and weather conditions. So we never really announce with many hours in advance what we are going to do. There's always a plan in our minds together with the expedition leader and the captain, but you never know until you are not there. So whatever the plan was at the end of the day, it was always the best and safest plan that we could offer travelers to fully enjoy Antarctica. When we go ashore, there are all sorts of moments and options that we can experience. So sometimes we walk pretty close to the coast. Some other times we can climb to reach a lookout or the top of a hill. So every single traveler can choose the option that suits them the better, because we know that, you know, physical condition sometimes is not the same for everybody. So options are always good for travelers. And some other times, of course, like on this picture, we can get close, keeping the distance of different penguin colonies.
All right, now that we know what the zodiac is, let me just explain to you the different steps of the zodiac operation, which is critical for the safety of everyone and the enjoyment of everyone. So there's a sequence of pictures right here. The very first one shows this little marina, which is basically a small platform. Depends on the ship you are, of course, but in this case, it's a fairly small marina that is used to load and unload the zodiacs. And of course, as you can see, there's always two seamen there, giving their hand to each traveler so they can do it step by step. Here is another picture that shows pretty much from the side. And of course, the whole crowd is divided into small groups, and they can put any number between 8 to 12 passengers per zodiac, per boat. And that, of course, depends on the weather conditions. Like, for instance, this picture, a remarkable day, a sunshine day, beautiful, high clouds, and no wind. However, it is critical to have these guys in the water, those two guys you see on each side of the boat, in order to secure the landing before we let anybody go off the zodiac. Like in this other picture, you can also appreciate this how the two other guys are in the water, just expecting for the next boat to arrive. And you can see on the far left side the expedition leader. And when people come ashore, this is what they face in some of the landing sites. Patches of snow, some algae. It could be a bit slippery, very uneven most of the time, and a lot of rocks, as you can see. This is the reverse process. When people go back after spending, let's just say, roughly average an hour of your time out on shore, ashore. And but this is basically when people get ready to get back to the ship, and they get assisted by the trip leaders and the expedition staff that is always there to give everybody a hand.
Okay, so now you know already Carlos talked about his favorite bird. This is my time. We are starting with wildlife, and we will share some information about the species that you might see when you go to Antarctica. So I love penguins. On this slide, you can see the 18 different species of penguins that they live in the world, all of them in the southern hemisphere. And the ones you can see inside those red circles are the 5 species that live in Antarctica. This picture that I love, because I could only take a shot like this twice, and this is my best one, even though you are counting 4 different penguins on that photo, there are 3 different species. They are all called the brush-tailed penguins. They have several things in common. For example, they can live up to 20 years when they are in the wild. They basically feed on small fish, squid, and the famous krill. And when it comes to predators, if they are swimming in the ocean, the main predators can be orcas, killer whales, and seals. But when they are on land, adult penguins, they don't have any predators, but their chicks can have, for example, birds like the skuas that they can eat their chicks, or also they can be egg predators. Now let's name each of these species. The first one is the gentoo penguin. They have this orange reddish beak, and this is the only species that we assure that people will see when we go to Antarctica. Then the other two, we never know, because it depends on the places that you visit throughout the expedition, if you can see them or not. So gentoo is the first one, then chinstrap penguin, and the cute adelie penguins. I want to tell you a bit about the mating season that starts in October. So males go back to the place and they try to find the same nest and the same partner than the previous year. So after the mating occurs, the female will lay 2 eggs, that's in November, and both parents take turns to incubate the eggs for a month or 40 days. And they also take turns to take care of the babies for the first month after the babies are born. Then once the babies are 2 months old, both parents leave, they go swimming and feeding, and the chicks stay together in groups because they need to keep themselves warm and also to protect themselves against the predators, of course. And once the chicks are 2 months old, they will start molting. This means they will change the fluffy down for the waterproof feathers that are the ones that will allow them to swim in the ocean. Now I want to tell you about a few specific facts of each of these species. So we start with gentoo penguins. They are the third largest penguins in the world. First one, the largest, is a famous emperor penguin. Second one is a king penguin, and the third one is this one. So they can be 30 inches tall or 80 centimeters. That's a cute baby asking for food. And they are also considered to be the fastest swimming penguins in the world. They can swim up to 22 miles per hour. That's mama or papa feeding the chick. And they are the largest group on the peninsula. So that's why I told you, if we take the traditional or classic Antarctica trip, we basically cover the peninsula. And that's why I told you, since they are the largest group, that these are the ones that we always get to see when we go there. These are the fluffy chicks when they cannot go into the ocean yet. And I want to practice this with you. If now you close your eyes and we can transport ourselves and be for a moment in Antarctica, we get to this gentoo penguin colony, and this would be the sound that we would be hearing right now. So those are our gentoo penguins. Now let's talk about the adelie penguins. They are one of the two 100% Antarctic species. What do I mean with this? That the adelie penguins, together with the emperors, are the only two species that exclusively live and nest in Antarctica. While the other species, they can also nest on what we call the South Atlantic islands as well. They are the largest group on the continent. So this is opposite to the gentoo penguins. Gentoos basically live in the peninsula, and the farthest south we go, the more adelie penguins will get to see. And some of their migrations have been recorded being as long as almost 11,000 miles. This is kind of cute. It's one of the big chicks when they are molting. So it's on the process to be waterproof and be ready to swim in the ocean and get some food. So again, if we can be right now in Antarctica, this is a really cool adelie penguin colony, and this would be their vocalization. And last but not least, chinstrap penguins. They're one of the most aggressive species, but this is when it comes to protect themselves, and especially their chicks. Can you see those two little chicks under mama or papa's belly? They are really cute, but those adults are the ones that they need to protect them from predators, or even if people are visiting and we stand too close, they will be really noisy. And so that's why they give louder and more frequent calls than some of the other brush-tailed penguins. And outside their breeding season, they will congregate on icebergs. So yeah, it's very common that even from the ship, when we are sailing through some parts of Antarctica, we can see the chinstrap penguins on an ice floe. Again, a cute chinstrap chick. And let's prove that they are the noisiest ones by listening to this audio. So I hope you could recognize or notice the difference among the three different calls of the penguins. That's a sound that we've been missing a lot because it's been the first time this past summer here that we did not go for Antarctica in many years. So we really miss the penguins. We don't miss the smell of the penguins' poop, but we love them anyways. Some rare sightings. This can happen once in a while if you're very, very lucky. Like it only happened once to me that I got to see one really cool macaroni penguin. We don't get to see any of the colonies there. Also king penguin. The king penguins, the largest colonies of these species, they are on South Georgia Islands. But one time I found this king penguin in the middle of a gentoo penguin colony. So since we were talking about sizes, on this picture, you can clearly see the difference in size between the second and the third largest penguins. And in this case, this is not a different species, but it's a female gentoo penguin that she used to live at a research station from Chile. She has this special genetic condition that it's called leucism. So because she was leucistic, she was named as Lucy by the officers of that station. There's a difference between leucism and albinism. So in the case of leucism, they lose part of the pigment on the feathers, but as you can see, they keep the pigment in their eyes and their beaks. She lived for 6 years there, and I think she's gone because they have not seen her for 2 seasons already. Now I want to show you these videos of my dear penguins in action. These are 2 adelie penguins. All penguins do this, but adelies love it. It's called tobogganing. This is the moment when they lay down on their bellies to push themselves and move or slide on the ice. So they look very cute when they do it. Many people are like looking for this moment, but as you can notice, I was not close to them. Look how far I was. That's because I use the zoom in my camera, and you can also see the scenery. That was a typical Antarctic day, talking about weather, of course. This next video here are the chinstrap penguins. It's kind of funny because sometimes you are waiting and waiting and waiting because this was a Zodiac tour and they don't go swimming. So you're always expecting to get that special shot. And in this case, we were lucky. So there they go, off to swim all the chinstrap penguins. And here you will see Gentoo penguins on the so-called penguin highways. You know, they need to connect their rookeries with the ocean. So by going up and down the hill every single day, they erode the ice or the snow. So we call those paths as penguin highways. We can see them from the ship sometimes. And we always tell travelers that if we are walking ashore and we come across a penguin highway, we need to stop, as you can see here, let them cross, let them pass, and then we can keep walking. But as you can see on that day, there was quite some traffic on that penguin highway. So it's also kind of cool when we can get to stand close to the highways of the penguins. Some cool penguin shots, these two chicks behind mama asking for food for sure. This is a fluffy chinstrap chick, again, in the process of molting. And these are the adelies going for a swim in the ocean. And the last two are Gentoo babies. One baby here looking for food, and this poor one that after it was fed, he did not realize that the krill was about to fall out of his mouth. Poor chick. And this is my last penguin video for now. It was a gorgeous day. We were living in Argentinian research station, and the Zodiac driver was so kind that as soon as we saw these penguins on that ice floe, we wanted to stay. And so she let us stay for a while. These guys were following that leader that it clearly looked like he wanted to jump. Well, then he said, no, this is not the right time of the day to go for a swim. So one turns back, all the rest just follow. But now that you will see to the left, the rest of the ice floe, there's something in there. There's a leopard seal, which is usually a threat for penguins. But it was sleeping, very relaxed. So penguins didn't bother. So look at this. They are flying in and out the water. I just love them, love them. So this is my last penguin video here and my last penguin cool shot. I'm proud of this one. I'm not a photographer, it's just that I love nature and I love taking pictures. And to finish with the part of penguins, I want to share with you this quote. It's practically impossible to look at a penguin and feel angry. I agree 100%. I love penguins. I will never, ever get tired of seeing them. So I always want to go back to Antarctica to be close to these little guys.
Well, there is no doubt the penguins are amongst the cutest creatures on this planet. But let's just switch from penguins to other animals that we do expect to see when being in Antarctica. One of them is the humpback whales in general. But the hampas are the most abundant and the most numerous, not only in Antarctica, but all over the world. And we would like to leave you with this this picture. This video. Oh, first of all, just a few facts. We have the humpbacks are about the size of a school bus, so you have a more or less an idea how large they are. And what about their names? The name comes from the large hump that forms when they arch their backs before making a deep dive into the ocean. And now we will leave you with a very short video that was shot from the ship itself, and we'll just leave you with the background noise. So you don't only hear the many pictures being taken but also you can hear the spouting of the whales as well. They tend to be rather friendly, and they are found in every ocean in the world. Sometimes they blow bubbles to make fish catching nets, or the bubble netting way of catching fish. And what the humpbacks actually make a long migration twice every year. They travel to cooler polar waters in summer to feed, and then to warmer tropical waters in the winter to breed. And just please pay attention to this video. It was actually taken from a Zodiac by a very well experienced expedition staff member, and nevertheless he got very, very excited. So fix your eyes right in the center of the screen right now.
Oh, guys, do you see what I'm seeing?
So he's sharing that moment with everyone over the radio, and he didn't only get the breaching whale, but the tail as well. And I was just coincidentally on the stern of the ship and looking at the same spot, but from the opposite direction. I hope you can still feel, you know, through his words, his excitement, even though he's been to Antarctica more than 100 times, because things like this don't happen every day. So you don't have to take any moment in Antarctica for granted. Okay, so seals. Let's talk about seals a little bit. This is a very cute, I would say, rounded shape, rounded face, kind of like cat-looking face, almost, with whiskers and everything, and so-called Weddell seal. The Weddell seal is the most southern of any mammal. That's quite remarkable. Now the next one, if the previous one was the cat-looking, this is the dog-looking seal, and they're probably the most abundant large mammal on Earth, and by far the most numerous kind of seal in the world. And the southern elephant seal, these are two immature individuals, and males can weigh up to 10 times more than females weigh. And the greatest by far weight disparity between sexes of any mammal. And the Antarctic fur seal is unlike unlike some or other species of seals. The Antarctic fur seal, they have visible ears, so they're called eared seals. It is the only seal with visible ears that lives in Antarctica, not the yes, in Antarctica. And now we would like to share with you just a short video that shows two crab-eater seals and the dog-looking, remember? So on land, the crab-eater seals have an almost snake-like method of movement, weaving their front and back ends back and forth in curving motion. And there you are, really beautiful creatures. And the next are the fur seals. The fur seals are an example of seals that can walk on land, as you can see on that video, because of their ability to turn their rear flippers forward, turning them into a useful kind of feet, I would say, and they could easily outrun a human. Now, by far, when we talk about seals, we have to actually say that the leopard seals are the most formidable hunters of all seals, and the only ones that feed on a warm-blooded prey, such as other seals. Remember the cat-looking, dog-looking? This is more like a reptilian-looking. Look at that beautiful face, incredible jaws, sharp teeth. That's really an enormous animal. We managed to make a video of one of them after resting, maybe after feeding, most likely. They are the third largest seals in the world, and they can be as large as 10 feet long. And the only predators to leopard seals are orcas. So there you are, and this is in a place called Deception Island. We will talk later about it. And it was really relaxed. It stayed there for quite a while. We kept, of course, our distance, and it was a lot of fun to watch her go away. All right, we come to a moment when we truly like and enjoy the excitement, I would say, from my part, I'm about to share a video with you. The orcas are definitely the kind of animals you're expecting to spot. They're not really, I would say, the kind of whale that would approach the ships in general. It's the other way around. As soon as they see a ship, they tend to swim away. So you need to have a good photo lenses and binoculars to get a good shot of the orcas. However, Antarctica surprises you, and this happened to us only once. And we saw two orcas. They came to the ship, and it was so magical. And I went, and everybody went crazy and very, very excited. I don't know whether you speak any Spanish, but regardless the language, you're going to hear my voice calling my friend and colleague who was on the upper deck, running literally alongside just to get the best shots of these orcas. So let's just enjoy the moment.
La tengo, Ticho. La tengo. Ay, por Dios, no se puede creer. Ticho. Ay, no se puede creer esto, qué emoción, por Dios. Estamos mirando una orca. Una orca, impresionante. Increíble, la estoy siguiendo. Dos.
Well, of course, we trimmed the video anyways, but we just wanted to hear that and transmit the excitement through our voice. Okay, so let's go on and talk about other birds you see in Antarctica. People normally call, when you see a white bird like this, they call it the Antarctic pigeon, but obviously they're not. Their names, its name is snowy sheathbill. And when you talk about gulls in Antarctica, the only one that lives, it's a migratory bird just during the short summer, it would be then the kelp gull, as you see right here in the picture. You also find cormorants or Antarctic shags, and also another remarkable bird. This is the, it looks like an albatross, but it actually is smaller, and it's the southern giant petrel. And it's probably resting up there, and maybe after feeding. There's one picture here in flight, and they're just like a human, just like us. The grayer they are, or the whiter they are, the older, just like us. And this is one of the smallest birds you see in Antarctica, the Antarctic tern. Its cousin would be the Arctic tern, and these two are the Ushuaias that Laura talked about. If you pay attention to the picture, right in between the two Ushuaias, they're actually dragging a dead chick penguin or penguin chick out of the colony right there, and you see the parents, or at least adults, standing right there, terrifying and looking at the scene. It seems like it was dead already for some reason, and they just managed to drag it out of the colony, and we captured that with our cameras. Now, remember the Zodiac, the inflatable boats, the rubber boats. Okay, we told you the importance of being in the Zodiacs. Normally, right after the rides, the first ride, the first Zodiac cruise, let's just say, people, when they come back on board, this is the first thing they say. There's modern art here in Antarctica, and they do refer to the different icebergs that and wildlife, obviously, that you get to see while riding the Zodiacs. This, however, this picture in particular was taken from the ship, but we decided to include this so we can explain to you that every time you look at an iceberg, if an iceberg were to be a human body, then what you see above the surface is the head. Everything else would be underwater. All right. Now look at this enormous icebergs, and you can truly appreciate the gesture, the textures, like in this picture right here, and look at this one right here. Not only the textures, but the colors and also the different shapes. It is truly fascinating to find this so-called modern art in Antarctica. Let's switch now from that subject to research stations and what people do and whether we go ever to visit any of the stations. So here is the map of the continent that shows most of the active stations. There are about 30 different countries that are represented in Antarctica that operate about 80 research stations, and we are counting seasonal or summer stations and permanent situated around the continent. And the human inhabitants who occupy these facilities number around 5,000 during the summer months and only about 1,000 during the long, harsh winters. The question here is, do we visit any stations? We try to do our best. Like Laura said before, every single activity in Antarctica is weather dependent. And of course, the most enjoyable and the best experience is the safest experience. So safety is priority. And here we have an example of a very small summer station right by Chile, and 15 to 16 different Air Force staff members. And they come here to station to summer to work in the station for roughly 3 to 4 months. And this is a small video that shows how small that place is. It looks like a little island, but it's actually part of a small peninsula. Therefore, it's attached to the land, and it is one of the continental landings that we offer to our travelers as well. And the routines are always the same. When you come there, you remember you divide up the big group into smaller groups. So, and you ride the Zodiac ashore. Once you're on land, then you're greeted by the chief command of the station himself, and you are directed all along this walking path. Look how close we get to the penguins, and later Laura will refer to some of the many studies that are actually carried out in several stations, and one of them has to do with the presence of humans, whether the penguins are badly influenced or bothered during their life cycle. All right, but look, there's a museum. They do feature a little museum, and believe it or not, a small souvenir shop. So sometimes even penguins like that one right there show their interest and lining up waiting for his ticket.
So now it's my turn to tell you a bit about one Argentinian station. Argentina is a country that has had the longest presence in Antarctica since 1902. So nowadays the country runs 13 different stations. Some of them are permanent, some other are seasonal. But my favorite one is this one. It's called Esperanza. Esperanza means hope. So it's located in Hope Bay, and it's like a little village. Together with one other Chilean station are the only two that have civilians living there. So last year at Esperanza Station 2020, there were 63 people living there, families including children. When we get there, it's a similar procedure. We go by groups and we are greeted by the staff who are living there. So they are our guides and they walk us through the facilities. This is a little town village, so they have their own little chapel. And this is where the babies were born. Remember? This was here at Esperanza Station, and also some people got married here. But maybe the most important building that is a difference with some other stations is this one. This is the school of Esperanza Station. And until 3 or 4 years ago, there was a Chilean station that also had a school, but it was closed. So for the last years, this has been the only school in all Antarctica. Right now it's closed because of COVID, because between December and February, the new families go there. So just to prevent any families to go to Antarctica and take COVID into the continent, this is, as an exception, the first year that is not open. But last year, it was the only school in all Argentina that offered in-person classes. So that's me in blue with one of the staff members. We were waiting with my group to meet one of the teachers and talk for a little while with him. And in here you can see them, the two teachers. They are a couple. And those were the children, 14 children who spent 1 year in Antarctica last year. So what they do is they go from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. They take a break for lunch. And that's how they study. So they, in general, really enjoy the experience there. And in general, it's a couple of teachers who apply for this job. So they take their own children, as you can see on this picture, and they also teach the rest of the children in the station. Now, this picture, it's gorgeous because you can have an idea of the magnitude of Antarctica, the scale, how big everything is in there. But I did not put that picture just for that reason. It's because I want to tell you a bit about one of the most visited sites in the whole Antarctica when we go. Can you see where that is? Because it looks so tiny, and that's how each of us feels when we are there in the middle of that wonderful landscape. There it is. This place is called Port Lockroy. And as you can see on this picture, it belongs to England. The bay where it's located was discovered in the early 1900s, but England opened there in the 40s during Second World War and in a military base. But after the war, it was turned into a research station, and it was working until 1962. Then it became abandoned, and in 1996, thanks to the British Antarctic Heritage Trust, they renovated this main house that is called Bransfield House into a museum and also a gift shop. But when people visit and they enter the museum, they can learn how life was there during the 50s and the 60s. But the main reason why many people, when they go to Antarctica, want to visit Port Lockroy, this doesn't mean that you go there on every single trip. It can happen, it may not. It's because the Penguin Post Office is there. So that's my hand, the first time that I visited Port Lockroy, and I sent those 3 postcards. So there's a staff of 4 people who are in charge of the museum, this post office and souvenir store. So I was reading an article a couple of days ago, and the statistics say that they sent during our short Antarctica season, so during 5 months, there are more than 70,000 postcards that are mailed from there to more than 100 countries in the world. And apart from doing these activities, this is one of the places where those 4 people, they study the penguins, because there's a Gentoo penguin colony all around the house that is located on a little island. So what happens is that they have been studying how the presence of visitors can affect or impact negatively the colonies of penguins. So far, so good, and no negative impacts on these penguin colonies.
All right. When going to Antarctica, and oftentimes we read some literature, and we will find this famous Deception Island, which has a shape of a donut and with a very little narrow entrance. And I'm going to just now mark and highlight for you the so-called Neptune's Bellows, which has a it measures 230 meters or 755 feet. Now, Deception Island is basically a collapsed caldera of a volcano. It is still an active volcano. And last eruption was back in the 1960s. And during that time, it actually affected a Chilean research station, and the staff members had to be rescued and evacuated in a helicopter out of the island there. No injuries, fortunately. Once you make your way, or ships make their way, which is kind of tricky because of the winds, into the so-called Port Foster, over the right-hand side, you run into the so-called whaler station, and you see the steam coming out of the beach area there. What is that? It's because of the geothermal activity still going on in Deception Island, and right on to the other side from where that picture was taken, you could see some of the ruins of the old whaling station, and you see the old oil tanks. And you see also another building there. They're all part of the they're considered as historic sites. So people are absolutely banned from entering into any building. On top of that, they're in very deep stage of deterioration. And then among the activities that we offer, being in Deception Island, it's short hikes. And just to reach us some lookout points sometimes. That's why you see, it is so dark, so blackish kind of sand. Over the right, you see five little things there. They actually look like rocks. They're not. They're fur seals. They're the Antarctic fur seals. Sometimes they're very aggressive and very territorial. And of course, we take this very seriously, and we bring always at least two staff members, maybe sometimes three. When we divide the group into a smaller group as well, and we do a little hike. So we need to keep a fairly good distance, from these animals that could be pretty aggressive sometimes.
So I would like to share with you some of the ones I call traveler moments, some photos and some videos. This first one, you can clearly see our travelers were out there. But what time was it? This was about 10 p.m. That's the time when many of our travelers, they are usually in bed. There was something so magical happening outside that we decided to make an announcement. So maybe we walked some of them up, but there they were. They just bundled up and they were ready, enjoying what was going out and what Antarctica was offering us. Some other moments, like when we go for these hikes, when you realize where you are, this looks like a painting. That mountain in the background, it's just gorgeous. And here, this is also a special moment that travelers in general like, but it's not that it's going to happen on every single trip. So if the weather cooperates, and if we don't really need to cover a long distance from the destination we visit in the morning and the one in the afternoon, the crew and staff work hard because they just have a few hours and they put together this barbecue out on deck. So it's usually one of the favorite traveler moments. And in here, Carlos mentioned about the Zodiac tours. They are a very important part of the expedition. So we got to that place. It wasn't sunny, but it was perfect because we found that iceberg and it had that cave. So going around on the Zodiac, we could find it. And the deep blue that you could see, this is not photoshopped. So it was amazing. That's why, like Carlos mentioned before, the Zodiac driver turned off the engine and we stayed for a while, just contemplating and absorbing everything that was in front of our eyes. This is a video that I'll play for you. That's me with one of my travelers. And we offer this kind of short hike up to a lookout. The weather was already warm, so it was great for us. It's really bad for wildlife and the ice, as you know, but we did physical activity. So it was even warmer when we reached the top. And that's why you will see one of our expedition team members wearing just short sleeves, and then many red jackets of our travelers that they just left them on the ground. They kept walking for a while, but of course, then we need to put all those layers and on top the life jackets to take the Zodiacs and go back to the ship. That was a wonderful, unusual sunny day. This is a typical Antarctic day. It was windy and it was raining a little bit, but this time, it was a couple of years ago, we offered like a more demanding hike. I told you that we offer options for all the different kinds of travelers that we have. And in this case, it was steep and it was slippery. So we had to use those ropes for the people to hang on those, but it was a great experience. Some of them, as you can see, remained down at the bottom. The scenery was just beautiful from sea level or also from the top of the hill where we were standing. And now, this is one very special moment. I remember the first time I saw pictures like this, I was like, are they crazy? What are they doing? It's so cold. This is what we call the polar plunge. The way we did it, it's just run in and out of the water. Some companies, they directly do it from the ship, like from the bow of the ship. They put you a harness and you just jump into the ocean and then they bring you back to the ship. So not 100% of travelers, they go for it. We usually try to encourage them because in general, it's just once in your life that you are in Antarctica. So it's worth doing it. And I will play this video so that you can see that some are the people who go for it and then they get too many paparazzis behind them. Okay, so those are great moments. And if you do it, you will never, ever forget it. And now this is the last part of our presentation. We would like to share with you just some of the many memorable moments that we've experienced in Antarctica and that we treasure in our hearts and minds. My first moment, of course, it has to do with penguins. To me, anytime I can be close to penguins, it's very magical. I love those moments. So in this case, I have these two videos. This first one on the left, you can see Mama or Papa Gentoo that is taking care of one egg. Maybe the other one was lost throughout or halfway through the incubation period. But you can see how carefully they take excellent care of those eggs. And on this right picture, this was right outside Port Lockroy. It's Mama or Papa feeding the chick. You will see that their chicks, they peck under their beaks so that they can stimulate regurgitation. That's the way they feed their babies. So there are many penguins in there around Port Lockroy, but you can also see some of these snowy sheepbills. You will see there's one in there. They basically eat what we call the garbage of Antarctica, but they are always there. They are very opportunistic, so they are there expecting to see if some part of the food falls. There they are, stealing it.
All right. I told you before, you never take anything that happens to you in Antarctica for granted. And we managed this past year to actually to step on pack ice. So it's frozen seawater basically, and they set a perimeter. So the expedition staff, the captain, they just found that's the expedition leader there waving at the camera there, and they set a perimeter, and they of course sent out 2 Zodiacs at a time just to be there, to experience what it's like to be standing or stepping on sea ice. And when that happens, all of a sudden we saw these 3-4 penguins that came along and pay attention. They just were mingling with humans, and what we do, we just stand still and without moving, without bothering the creatures. And this was in East Antarctica on the way to, I guess it was past the Antarctic Sound. And we were on the way later on, maybe 3-4 hours, as far as I remember, to witness which was actually one of the largest icebergs in the world that broke off from Larsen's ice shelf back in July 2017. So that means that for 3 years, that enormous piece of ice was floating and drifting pretty much and practically untouched. And last year, this December 2020, the scientific community got really concerned about the drifting of this enormous iceberg, because it started to move towards the northeast of Antarctica, where the famous South Georgia Islands are. And it became soon after that a threat. At the speed it was traveling towards this island, and the impact it may actually cause to the whole ecosystem and environment. Luckily, January, February this year, they realized that because of the currents that move around that South Georgia Islands, it was diverted directions, and it started to break up into small pieces little by little. This is a huge iceberg. So take a look of the size. It's 2,200 square miles, equivalent to Delaware State. Incredible. Now, we discovered that about 80% of the expedition staff members had never been to this place before. It was really to my surprise. Can you see the 2 Zodiacs way at the back of the image right here? So they looked really little, like little tiny boats. And we managed to bring the Zodiacs and offer this opportunity to sail through these little channels that are formed by these number of rocky islands basalt. Basically, they're made out of and have volcanic origin. And again, it's so unlike Antarctica. For those of us who've been to Antarctica multiple times, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was so beautiful, so peaceful, and so powerful at the same time that it's definitely one of my memorable moments from last year.
And now, do you remember when I showed you that traveler's moment photo and I told you we walked some people up 10 p.m.? This was happening right on the opposite side. This magnificent sunset. This started like 10 p.m. and it lasted for more than 2 hours. I'm playing the video so that you can see the video, the photos, because it was such a long time that we spent outside that we saw the whole process of this sunset. It brought tears to the eyes of many people. In our case, we've seen many sunsets, but this has been, at least for the two of us, the most wonderful one that we've experienced, not only in Antarctica, but everywhere. So it really shows how magic and powerful Antarctica is. This is one of our pictures working together. Once in a while, we get the chance to be on the same ship, working with different groups of travelers. And this is our last picture, and we want to share with you our feelings towards this white continent that it's Antarctica.
I feel profoundly touched and moved every time I visit Antarctica. It is an indescribable feeling that words cannot express, but only my eyes and soul would treasure such a life-changing experience.
There's no other place like Antarctica in the world. It's hard to express with words how you feel when you are in the middle of that icy landscape. Every time I go, I feel very fortunate. And there's always a very emotional moment that brings tears to my eyes. Magic and pure nature have come together to create my paradise on Earth. And this is our last video. Carlos managed to take his GoPro camera and he could get this shot from a zodiac, as you can see. It was a spectacular day in a place that cannot have a better name. As you can see, it was filmed in Paradise Bay. So we want again to do this exercise with you. We could read that many of you have not been there. It was just a very small group of people attending our virtual tour. So just to have a touch of Antarctica, we added some music. We'll play this video and we want to take you all just for 1 minute down to Antarctica. So Antarctica, visiting Antarctica, it's a life-changing experience. We always say that once you go there, you are never the same person than before. And we really hope that you can all get to visit Antarctica one day, but at least with our virtual tour, we had this goal of trying to take you for some time down to Antarctica and you could feel the love and passion that we feel for this place. The 98% of the photos and videos are from our personal collection, but these are some websites from where we got some general information and some people who helped us to put this presentation together. We want to thank Mara very much. It's been a year since we've been home without working, so to give us this chance to do this, it's it means a lot
It's
to us.
priceless.
Yes. And so we are working with some friends. We call ourselves passionate guides. So we do some virtual tours about Argentina and Chile. If you want, or if you have any questions, if you're planning to come, apart from asking Mara, if you need any specific details, you have our website and email that we wanted to share with you. And with this, we want to thank you so much for your attention and for being there on the other side. It's very important for us. Thank you all so very much.
We truly
Thank
hope
you.
you have enjoyed.
Thank you so much, Laura and Carlos. I just want to ask our audience, can you hear me okay? If you could just chat me, fine. Okay, great. There was a little bit of an audio issue, I think, after the video played, which grabbed your audio and took it away from you. But I think luckily you shared your information on your slides as you were speaking. So most people saw what you were talking about. But if you didn't see the passion in Laura's face to support the information on the slides, you can assure that she was saying that everybody needs to visit Antarctica and it will forever change you. So with that, I want to say thank you, because it's just the virtual tour itself has changed me. I know I will be forever touched when I land on Antarctica in 2025, and I can't wait to see both of you when we go and do that. So it's time. I know you have to take a quick break and a breather to prepare yourself for the Q&A. There's a lot of questions in here. I'm going to start with the first one because this question kept coming up over and over again. And I think as guides, you take it for granted because you're there every time. But most people noticed that the outerwear that was being worn by all the travelers seemed to be extensive: jackets, pants, boots, gloves.
Right.
Is that supplied on every expedition, and how does that happen? Do people rent them? Are they supplied to them? Do you just borrow them when you're on the boat? How does that work?
Yeah, at the beginning, we all look like, oh my God, do we have to wear all of this every single day? The answer is yes. First of all, because we need all the outer layers to be waterproof, because even though it doesn't rain a lot, it's raining more. But also, even on a beautiful sunny day, sometimes when you go for a zodiac tour, because of the motion, the splash can make part of your body wet. So you really
Laura,
need
I'm gonna interrupt you.
Yes.
Can you do me a favor and mute yourself and unmute yourself? Because for some reason the audience can't hear you, even though I can.
Let me do that.
Let's see if they can hear you now.
Just let us know if they can hear us better now.
Yes, it looks like that you're coming in. I think it was just a glitch with after the video played, but now you're good. So you can go back and answer that gear question, I think.
No problem. Yeah, it's hard at the beginning. It's like you have to practice this exercise. We say it's an everyday exercise of putting all those layers on and then take them off several times a day. So there are some part of the gear we communicate prior to the departure. Sometimes it's like maybe months or 3 weeks before we start sending emails. Of course, each company sends lots of information and advises the kind of gear that you must bring. Because, well, in the case of the US, you have too many places where you can buy stuff. In general, it's cheaper than in our countries. You have all sorts of sizes. So as soon as you get to our countries, you don't have the same variety. So it's much better if you come with it already. You can always do like a last minute shopping. There's something you maybe forgot. So the boots are provided by the companies. Some of them can rent them in Ushuaia, for example, or some others have them on the ship. So they will ask for sizes to make sure that at least they would have one. Of course, then you can change them if they don't fit you once you are on the ship. And the parkas or jackets, all companies provide them. In the case of the companies that we worked for, they are delivered to the house of the travelers. So it's kind of funny because it depends on, we work with US travelers. So in general, it depends on where they live. Some of them live in very cold places, like if it's December. So instead of putting that parka inside a suitcase, they already bring it on. But then they appear in the middle of Buenos Aires city, summer, the heat, the humidity. So it's kind of tricky, but then we manage. And then the layers under the jacket, it's up to every person, because of course our thermostat is not the same. So some people feel the cold more than others. Again, it depends on what you are used to and where you live. I communicate with many of my travelers throughout the year, and I know, for example, in the case of the US, that some of your areas in winter are way much colder than the temperatures that we experience in Antarctica during our summer. So yeah, the gear that companies provide are parkas, that of course that's like a gift, or it's what you pay for the trip, so then you keep it if you like. The boots are provided, but just for the duration of the trip. And then you bring the rest of the layers. So basically the one that it's a must, it's a waterproof pant, because you can bring like a ski pant, or just, you know, the outer like thin layer that is waterproof, and then you can wear like long johns under it. And then you can bring gloves and different kinds of hats. Trekking poles are very useful, even though the different companies can have some on board, but it's much better that if you know you will use them, you bring them along with you. Am I forgetting anything about?
No, a good pair of sunglasses
Yes.
are extremely useful, because the radiation and the sunlight reflection you get on right onto your eyes, you know, it could be pretty painful sometimes. Yeah.
Great. Before you dive into the questions, I'm going to let you start reviewing them. I will just speak because there's a lot of questions about what I referenced, which is we plan to go in 2025. If you are interested in that trip and you want to see a brochure, just send me an email, or you can PM me if you're on Facebook, and I will send it over to you. Just send me your email. I will also include a link on tomorrow's follow-up email with all of Laura's research and resources that she provided in a PDF. And I will also send you a link of the brochure for the real life trip in 2025, February of 2025. So just those two things will be included as well in the follow-up email tomorrow for the Zoom attendees. Laura, if you're ready, we can go over to the Q&A and we can start trying to attack all these questions. I can tell you already, we have too many questions to address tonight, but we will do our best to address things that we haven't already talked about on the presentation, and then we'll follow up with any of the things that we have missed after the event in the PDF. I think a lot of things are addressed in that as well. Before you get into it, Laura, though, I will ask you, because this is another question that's come up over and over again. What is a typical temperature in Fahrenheit that you deal with when you're visiting in February or the on-season months in Antarctica?
Okay, so it can go like from 32 Fahrenheit to maybe, I would say 42, 43.
Is it dry or is it a wet, humid kind of air? Is the air dry? Like,
Yeah, it is extremely dry, and
Yeah.
it's the air actually carries very little moisture, so it's extremely dry. And yes, the temperatures, like Laura was saying, you know, it's sometimes, because this is the summer in Antarctica, and of course, for the U.S. travelers, when they come from the winter months, and it's sometimes by far much more colder than Antarctica itself. So you deal with temperatures of 32, 36, I would say on a daily basis, but sometimes it could be as warm as maybe 38, 42. Now, the key thing, you know, when it comes to fully enjoy your experience in Antarctica and regarding weather, it's to have the right gear with you. That's basically it. That makes it all. You get the right gear, then you're good to go. You start with the right foot, and you assure yourself that you're not going to actually be wet and cold, because that's the worst combination. The worst that can happen to you is to get cold and wet. So anything you can do to keep yourself warm and dry will really enhance your experience. That's basically it. Let's put it that way. Okay. Let's see. We got here. We got a question here. How does Mount Everest scale to the highest mountain on Antarctica? Is there a mountain in Antarctica in the death zone? I don't know exactly what you mean by death zone. what we can.
Yeah, I was checking the Mount Everest in
Yeah.
feet, and it's 29,000 feet. And the one that I showed on my slide, it's a bit more than 16,000 feet, that it's Mount Vinson. So that's like the information or how we can compare one and the other. In fact, we live very close to Mount Aconcagua, which is the second highest in the world after the Himalayas. So yeah, in Antarctica is one of the famous peaks for climbers, but definitely there's still a difference if you compare with Mount Everest.
Right. And there's another question here, is how large would Antarctica be superimposed over the United States? I think you said it also at the beginning of the.
Yeah, Antarctica, it's 1.5 times the size of US, so 1 United States and a half, let's say, the size of the continent.
Right.
Let me see.
Does the size of the continent as given include ice? And in other words, if God forbid all the ice were gone, how big would it be? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I have actually seen some documentaries and scientific researches that they studied. They're based on computer models that they show that if Antarctica, all the ice was ever gone out of Antarctica, would be not only one of the smallest, perhaps the smallest, the smallest and the lowest continent on the planet, but it would be unveiling also and countless numbers of lakes and lagoons. It's quite interesting when you see that and think it from that perspective. But yeah, like if it wasn't for the ice, Antarctica definitely would be something completely different. We need to understand as well that Antarctica was once attached to the so-called Gondwana land. So it's this supercontinent that united, South America, Africa, and Australia all together. So it was densely forested at one point in time as well. And it is again, the studies in Antarctica nowadays are mainly about meteorology and the water as well, and the city of the water, and the krill, which is the base for the Antarctic food chain as well. And so, and what relation it is between the climate change and the diminishing of the krill population that will definitely affect the wildlife in the area.
Yeah. And does IATO apply to the seas as well as the landmass? Well, IATO is the Organization of Antarctic Tour Operators. So they regulate all the activities that the ships do when they are there. So by having this list of sites to go ashore, they limit the places that we can visit, even though some others that they can be different islands or like these scenic channels, you can go through and they are not part of that list. So I would say that IATO regulates the activities, but on top of IATO is the Antarctic Treaty that we mentioned. So everything that IATO does has to follow the treaty rules. Otherwise, no companies would be allowed to work in Antarctica.
A follow-up to that, does the treaty have an expiration date?
Yes, I just found the other day that, if I'm not wrong,
It's 2048?
2048 will be the year to review and renegotiate the Antarctic Treaty. Yes.
So we got a bunch of years to come, I would say. There's another question here, is why do you need to decontaminate the clothes? Well, basically because what we want to prevent is to bring the introduction of alien species into Antarctica, basically. So let's just say you're used to hiking up in the mountains, wherever you live, or maybe in the forest, in the woods, and you have your backpack, and then it is the same backpack you decide to bring for the Antarctic experience. So it might be actually hidden in the pockets or in the Velcro. Whatever has Velcro, it's potentially dangerous to Antarctica, fragile environment. And so if I can clean all those things like seeds or remains of dirt, or whatever it is that you were using the backpack, for instance, and as an example, and trekking poles is the same situation. We don't vacuum clean them. We actually have a solution, a disinfection solution. So we dip them into that solution every time before we go ashore, and every time we come back on board. And the same situation applies to anything that's been worn before, and whatever you are in situated in the world. Except if there is a piece of clothing brand new that you never used, for instance. That's the only thing that it's not inspected, even though sometimes people bring it anyway. So for us to have a visual inspection of what you have and what you gear in general. But we spend, we dedicate quite an amount of time to go through this process.
We have another question that is kind of tricky in a way, because it says, when you are born in Antarctica, what's your nationality? Is there an Antarctica passport or just your parents? So what I can tell you is what I know about these guys who were born in Antarctica, and they are from Argentina. Of course, after the Antarctic Treaty was signed, all the different claims from different countries that they are claiming a portion of Antarctica, they are literally frozen. So because of the treaty, nobody can claim, because as we said, Antarctica, it's a place dedicated to peace and science. And if countries want to have a research station in there, it's just because it's a natural reserve. So these guys were born in Antarctica. They are Argentinians. So it's because the station belongs to Argentina, they get an Argentinian ID. So it's like, and also it's because that's the part of Antarctica that Argentina claims. The thing is that Argentina, Chile, and UK claims overlap. So the claims are more or less about the exact same portion of Antarctica. So they were born as Argentinians, and the ones that were from Chile, different station, they were born as Chileans, and they got a Chilean ID card.
Yeah, just one little thing about the land claim in Antarctica. Because of the Antarctic Treaty that we referred before, the treaty itself actually puts aside all on hold, let's just say, any attempt for land claim in Antarctica. So until it is reviewed again in 2048. So that's one of the things, the aspects. It's going to be reviewed in roughly 20 years time from now. There's another question here about that I just saw there.
Yeah, some of them they
are there trips shorter than 9 days? Not that we know of. And the main reason is, think about this. You need 2 days one way to go southbound. And when you come back north, it's another 2 days. So it's 4 days out of 9, let's just say. So then you want to have a fairly decent amount of days to play around with your luck and weather and expertise from the expedition staff that shares the trip with you, because sometimes you plan for something and that it's not possible, then you're forced to switch everything around. And there's days that you could do maybe 2, perhaps 3, if you're extremely lucky, landings or activities, zodiac rides, ship cruising, all the things we mentioned. But sometimes the weather's so bad and it's so dangerous, and that obviously safety is first. It has to be prioritized by the captain and everyone else on board. And of course, we simply sometimes don't go. It's a no-go.
Anyway, I know when I was working as a local guide in Ushuaia, I knew that some companies in Chile, there's a city in Chile called Punta Arenas, from where some flights can depart, and they can take you to Antarctica like just for the day, or just like, like a scenic flight. Some of them, they didn't land at all. The problem with flights is that it's trickier for me than crossing the Drake, because sometimes you have like a buffer time. But if you cannot go because the weather is no good, or maybe the weather on the way is good, but where the landing place or the airport, some companies, they have not an airport, no companies, but some stations, they do have like a strip where the planes can land. Sometimes the weather, it's awful there. So sometimes you delay, and they finally cancel the tour. So that's what I've heard. I don't know if those companies, they are still doing that, but that can be like the shorter option if you want to go, but definitely it's not the same experience.
There's a couple of questions here from the same person. One of them is the polar bears live in the same place. Polar bears are only restricted to northern hemisphere. So, and is there a land under the snow and ice? Yes, there is. Unlike the Arctic, where it is actually frozen seawater, the Antarctica, it's a land mass covered by ice.
I read one that now just disappeared, that it's about if there's something similar to northern lights. Yes, southern lights, we call them aurora australis, because australis refers to south. The thing is that we go in summer, so you cannot see them. I've just seen pictures like from one of the Argentinian stations, but the ones that they are farther south in the continent, and they were all taken in May or June. So that's when you can see the southern lights.
Right, and it's because during the summer, you get almost 24 hours of daylight, so it's almost impossible to see any of those reflections there. Now, there's another question here. What if we want to answer that? What if there is another ship that has 50 people ashore, for example? Does this mean that only 50 people can get off?
Like I mentioned before, there can only be one ship, apart from these rules of how many people you can take ashore, there can only be one ship at a time in one landing site or spot. So if you see one ship, then you have to leave. But companies in general, they don't do that. Now that we have all the technology, for example, if we're planning to go to Port Lockroy, let's say, and we have to cancel that landing because of bad weather, then the expedition team starts looking for a different place. So with radars and GPS, they look for another place that can be closer where we might go for a landing. But they have to check if there's another ship in there. They need to communicate or contact that ship to know at what time they will leave. So then maybe we'll wait until the other ship leaves. So it's not only about how many people can be ashore, but also that there cannot be two ships taking people ashore at the same time.
There's another question here. How deep is the sea there? Well, during the direct crossing, the depths can go up to 2.5 miles. That's really deep ocean. Well, once you're in Antarctica, at least in the area of the peninsula, it's fairly deep, but not that deep. Maybe a mile, perhaps a little less than that. And in the areas that we go around the landing sites, that it's not really that deep. I can't really remember. I don't have the figure in my mind, but it's not really that deep. There is another question here about is South Georgia Island where Shackleton's expedition stopped? Definitely. You're actually touching a very inspiring subject to me. Because Sir Ernest Shackleton has been along my hero and to many people as well. And for those of you who don't know anything about this, you should actually, let's just say these days it's easier to go on Google Shackleton's Transantarctic expedition, and you will learn a fascinating leader who saved all his men. It was stranded in Antarctica for 2 long years. This happened towards the end of the heroic age of exploration back in from 1914 to 1916, and no one died. Everybody survived. It's fantastic. And yes, South Georgia Island, that is under the command of the English today. That's where they left from, and that's where they came back, from being rescued. And towards the end of the ordeal, and incredible.
So I want to read this question because I'm sure that many of our attendees, they are asking themselves the same. What do you take to help with seasickness when crossing the Drake Passage? We were talking about this with Mara before starting the tour. So it depends on how like sensitive you are. For some people, it's the first trip on a ship that they take. Some others are more used to sailing, but even for people who have experienced sailing before, the Drake Passage sometimes is not the same than any other area in the world. So what we try to tell the people before leaving home is to talk to doctor to see what doctor recommends about what's the best way to do it. So we have people bringing pills like Dramamine or Bonine, because it affects the people in a different way. For example, Dramamine puts me to sleep the whole day, but Bonine has not the same effect. So that's the one that works for me. The strongest option, I would say, is the seasickness patch, scopolamine patch. For example, in Argentina, pharmacies, I mean, it's not sold in Argentina. Argentina does not allow anybody to sell it. So you need to bring it along with you. I know it needs a prescription. So for the people who really usually suffer from seasickness, the patch is the only thing that works. Some other people are okay with the wristbands, eating apples, ginger tea.
Right. That helps a lot.
So it depends on the person. We as tour leaders, but also staff members and crew, we are always very, let's say, we keep an eye on every traveler. And we kind of scan through the ship, especially during the first morning after starting crossing the Drake, to see if we don't see a person, then we knock the door of the cabin just to make sure that they are okay. Sometimes it's just the motion and you feel you want to sleep, and that's fine. The idea is that you recover by the time you arrive so that you don't miss any of the parts of the expedition.
I would say the key thing here to bear in mind, if you're ever planning to a trip to Antarctica, you need to consult your own doctor and before coming over. So you shouldn't wait till you get to the destination pretty much, or right before you get on the ship, to then decide what kind of medication you will take, because every person is different. Now, people say that in a high percentage, if you're not a navigator, if you're not used to navigate, if you're not used to being on ships, you're going to get seasick. You're going to feel dizzy, and you're going to feel miserable sometimes. That happens a lot, but that is the price you have to pay. You have to pay to reach paradise.
Yes,
that's what we say.
It's worth going through that.
Absolutely. There's another question here. Is
an answer that it's easy is what does MTS stands for? That's for meters.
Yes, the metric system, meters.
Yes.
And then there's another question here. What have you done during your 60 trips to Antarctica? Where do you stay? Maybe I didn't make myself very clear. When I said 60 crossings, and that means 30 trips to Antarctica. So because of course each crossing counts as a separate one. So and there you are as 60. Now, I'm not a scientist, but scientists only, they would actually spend time either in the winter or in the summer, conducting these different studies, and they will stay in Antarctica, for a number of months or a number of weeks. Now, when we go, we just spend our time on shore for a little while, but then we all go back on board the ship, and of course everybody has a cabin on board, and that's where you truly get to sleep and get some rest.
Is there any way to visit Antarctica without crossing the Drake Passage?
Yes.
Well, some companies only from the city I mentioned before in Chile, Punta Arenas, they offer some trips that they are called like fly south or fly both ways. So you just board the ship when you landed in Antarctica. So you can fly there, but it's the same that I said before. Sometimes trips are canceled because of the weather that they find on the route, the air route.
Right. There's a question here. What size ship is this? Well, when it comes to size, like Laura said, the ship could take up to 200 passengers, but it's up to the company's decision and how many passengers they will put on board. So the company we used to work for, they, even though you could eventually take up to, I'd say 160 passengers or something, we just put 92, 94 as average, because we wanted to give them the best experience possible, you know, and as we said also, only less than 100 passengers are allowed to be on shore at a time, and that is one huge reason.
Yeah, but anyway, the tourism to Antarctica, it's increasing season per season. So last time I read, like our last season there, 2019, 2020, there were almost 78,000 people who visited Antarctica, which is really a minor number if you think about the population of the world. But this means that companies are using bigger ships. I mean, bigger, again, about the number of travelers. So the majority of the companies have ships for like 150 and 250 travelers. Just a few, they have these smaller ships for less than 100. How do you stand on deck if the waves are so high? When the Drake Passage, it's really shaking all of us. The decks are closed. You cannot go out. The activities we mentioned during our presentation, it's when it's a moderate drake or a lake if you are very lucky. But it's, of course, dangerous. And in fact, many times, even when it's moderate, for example, if the ship has an elevator, we cannot use the elevator while we are crossing the Drake, just stairs, because it can, again, be dangerous. So we are not allowed to stay outside if the waves are really high.
That's right. And we have to mention along with this, that most of the time, it is you find a quiet and more favorable weather when being in the peninsula rather than being in the middle of the Drake. So now there's a question here. Have you given your fabric albatross a name? No, we haven't, but it's a good idea.
You can give us an idea.
You can give us a good idea. That'll be cool. Okay.
During the trip, does the sun set? I expect there's daylight most, if not all the time. Yes, that's true. We go in our summer. So it's kind of weird because in our countries, we normally go to bed later than US travelers that we work with. So yeah, sometimes people are already in bed and we are still working in the computer. And it's like we said, midnight, and there's still light out there. So the night is pretty short. I would say it's from like maybe 12:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. That's it. And then it's daylight all the time.
That's right. How deep are the icebergs below the water surface? Think of when you look in an iceberg, you think about of a human. Think of it as a human figure. So the head is what you see above the surface, and everything else is underwater. So that gives you the perspective, and of course the sizes do matter. They say that to be classified or considered as an iceberg has to be more or less the size of a small British cottage. So you have an idea. Anything bigger than that is an iceberg. Smaller than that, it's not an iceberg. And you got several other technical terms to refer to all those little pieces of ice. All right.
What wild animals it is safe to pet? Zero.
Zero.
None. Yes. We are visiting their land, their territory. So one way of respecting that is we don't get close to them. We don't touch them, even though, for example, penguins are so cute, you want to hug them and take them home, of course. But we are not allowed to do that. That would be part of this negative impact that we were telling you about before. So just for us to keep going to Antarctica, we need to follow these rules, respect them. So there's no way you can pet any of the wildlife species that you might see.
Or feed them. Actually, yes. Food, like a little snack that you want to bring ashore for the duration of the landing experience, it's strictly prohibited as well. So for the same reason, the same thing, you have to be careful with plastic or bags or anything like that. So for sometimes people bring their large cameras, and we do suggest people to, in order to cover them, to have those special waterproof cases. Or if they have like Ziploc bags, we actually teach them how to turn those inexpensive Ziploc bags into a very useful, a waterproof bags that they get attached to the strap, so they never fly away into a penguin colony or into the ocean itself. So those are the kind of things and details that we really, really pay attention to very closely.
How do the ships travel safely with so many icebergs? I just picture Titanic getting hit. Well, you know that when we are on the ship, it is forbidden to pronounce that name. We never say Titanic, just in case. It's bad luck. But yeah, we don't really, the ships, they never really move in the middle of the icebergs if they are too close. Of course, the captain and officers, they have GPS, and so they monitor our route, and they know if it's free of ice and if there are not too many icebergs. None of the ships, except for one that is not going to Antarctica every season, none of them are icebreakers. So we cannot really get close to icebergs. So of course, every single company and captains they are working, they are very careful about that.
That's
so
correct.
It's not a problem.
They're very knowledgeable. They know the area, and that's another reason why it's a huge reason why we go in the summer, because there's less ice, and then more routes are open and less, more accessible. It's not that dangerous, and you got daylight pretty much 24 hours. So those factors combined, will make your trip possible during the summer. And there is another question here: is do the waters of the two oceans blend in different salinity, etc.? Yes, that's a good question. There is this imaginary line that is, I think is roughly a 62. I might be. Maybe I'm not that accurate, but anyways, there is a line that defines pretty much the difference in temperature between the blend, let's just say, of these two huge oceans and the so-called Antarctic Sea, and that's the Antarctic convergence. So the only way to make sure to really know and tell one from the other is just by measuring basically the salinity and also the temperature of the water by instruments. That's the only way. You can't really tell with your own bare eyes about the colors or anything like that. I've actually seen pictures and videos here and there that show when a perfect line in two different colors, and when the two oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, meet together, but that's not true. That's very much likely caused by glacier waters that are actually pushed by currents, from nearby glaciers. That's pretty much what you see when there is a significant, difference in colors.
Is there ever a time that you never make it ashore? Well, that would be a nightmare. Did not happen to us. No. Sometimes we had a trip that we had to make it shorter because of a problem that the ship had before leaving the port. So the people needed to bring, the spare part for it was like a radar, mm-hmm. the ice radar. So we had to wait. So we organized some extra tours, and then it was 1.5 days shorter in Antarctica, but we managed to fulfill the expectations of the travelers, because the program that we could put together with the leader and the captain basically had a bit of everything that the travelers were expecting to see in Antarctica. We have to know that Ushuaia is at the end of the world. So imagine Antarctica. It's a long way to get there. So you need to be very flexible. And without that, it's impossible to take a kind of trip like Antarctica, because you never know what's going to happen. Every minute is different, many updates, and you depend on a lot of factors that sometimes you cannot control.
right? There's another question. How long are you out? Meaning, how long do you have to be able to hold your bladder? Great question. Well, let's just say average an hour, but we're very flexible, and you're giving a time frame, let's just say, for the activity, either the hike or the time you're going to want to spend, whatever it is, the way that you want to spend your time ashore. You know, joining the hiking group if there is a hike already planned, or maybe just being around in the vicinity of the landing site itself and just watching penguins, whatever it is there to see. So, but if there is a need to go back to the ship, there's always one or two zodiacs just waiting for anybody to be brought back right away when they desire. So it's on the call. No problem about it. You don't really have to hold that for too long. How cold is that water just offshore? Let's see. How cold do you think it is?
I would say 32.
I would say 32, 33. When doing the plunge, for instance, because you have to something else. You know, the freezing temperature in Fahrenheit is 32, but that's for fresh water. For seawater, I think it's 29. So you could, when you do, if you decide to participate in the polar plunge activity, you have to bear in mind that your body will be into freezing cold waters of around 30 to 32. So that's really freezing cold. And but anyways, it's a once in a lifetime experience, I would say. You got then something to tell and share with your loved ones and friends when you get back home. They won't believe you, probably.
When visiting Antarctica via a large cruise ship, do the same restrictions apply with regards to getting off the ship? No. When I was telling you about the capacity, the number of travelers on the ship, any ship that has more than 500, which stands for one of these large cruise ships, let's call them, you name it, Holland America, Royal Caribbean, Princess Cruise Line, they are allowed to cross the Drake and sail through Antarctica, but it's forbidden for those large cruise ships to take anybody ashore. So they advertise Antarctica as part of their itinerary. They sell you the fleece with the penguins in your back, but you have to see everything from the ship. There's no way. Imagine we are trying, we want to take people to Antarctica to enjoy, but there's a limit. Like some of the Princess cruise ships can take 3,000 people at a time. It's too many people to be ashore at once, impossible. But also if you have to organize groups and take turns, you would spend 3 days there just to visit one place. So it's not allowed. It's okay for them to sail through.
This is another interesting question here. I have heard that the odor from penguins waste can be quite overwhelming. Can you elaborate? Yes, the first thing we got to say regarding this question is, if you're ever told that once you get to Antarctica, once you land in Antarctica, you will be walking in mud, that's a lie. Okay, so you will be walking in penguin's poop. And yes, it is quite strong. At first, sometimes it's so strong that it can be actually perceived, I would say, and right as you getting on the Zodiac, coming off the ship. And once you get there, you see all these pinky color kind of mud and guano, but that's basically what it is. Or and feathers, loose feathers around. That's basically the kind of environment you walk around, and kind of terrain you walk around. It makes it quite challenging, sometimes a bit slippery. And when you get back to the ship, then you realize the smell, because you get so used to that. Yes. At first it's like, wow, it's a shock, but you're so excited because you all you wanted to see is penguins, and there are penguins by hundreds around you. And of course, you forget about that. You start taking pictures and making videos, just really enjoying, put a smile on your face. But when you get back to the ship, after the very first landing, Then you take off your parka and go into your cabin, shower, take a shower, come out, and then you smell. I say, where does this strange smell come from? That's penguin's poop. So yes, definitely, it is pretty, outstanding. I would say odor, as you say, but it's part of the deal, right?
Yes, it is. Is this tour suitable for a 12, 14-year-old? In my opinion, definitely yes. We had some young guys going with us, but I think it depends on the personality of the boy or girl, because if I think about teenagers nowadays, that they mostly stay connected all the time, and all the rest of the life out there makes them feel bored. They have to know why they are going and what they are going to see. I think it's a fantastic experience that they will never forget, and they have to know that, like, kids their age, they don't, in general, they don't have that chance because it's a very expensive trip. But they have to know, of course, that they will not be connected. It depends on the company that you are traveling with. Some ships, just a few, can offer like Wi-Fi connection that is not reliable. You have to think where you are in the middle of nowhere. So you can text or send one email, but you cannot post like tons of pictures. Some other ships, they don't offer anything. And some others, the majority, you have to pay to be connected to Wi-Fi. So that's the only thing I think a teenager needs to be aware of, so that once it's there, they are there, they don't have anything to complain about.
Right. What are the penguins' nests built from? They're built from stones. So the most precious element for penguins are the stones. So, and if you remember, and when Laura showed us the video of the penguin highways, the so-called penguin highways, they tend to go from shore up higher, because those are the first spots that would rather get ice free sooner in the summer, and therefore you got more abundance of stones to make their nests. That's basically how that works.
So Laura, I think there are about 2 or 3 penguin questions right in a row here. Why don't you take them to end our time tonight, and we'll see that big smile on your face as you talk about the loves of your life, the penguin.
Yes. Apart from this guy here.
Of course.
Yeah, the first one is,
that was a test, Carlos. She passed.
Very good. Well said. Well put.
Is it hard to see all the different kinds of penguins in a single tour? It's not hard. I just mentioned that we assure that you only get to see one, the gentoos, because it happens a lot that people get on the ship with too many expectations. So we need to be clear on this. And it's wildlife. It's not that we call them and they will be there waiting for us. It's not a zoo that you know for sure that the lion will be there in a cage. This is different. So as the itinerary can vary from trip to trip, and you have to make last minute changes. Sometimes, I mean, when we work, we know that the expedition leader tries to choose as the first plan for the ship departure these 3 places where we can see the 3 different brush-tailed penguins. But maybe then the weather is not good and we have to cancel one, and there's no other place close to where we are where we can take travelers to see adelie penguins. So then we won't see adelie penguins in one trip. So that's hard to see. In general, we were lucky and we've seen them all, but that's why I wanted to clarify that. The same that one of the ships that we were on in the dining room had many pictures of emperor penguins that we will never ever get to see those, because it's a different expedition. You need to use an icebreaker, then you need to take a helicopter to reach the colony where those penguins are. That's my dream, but I don't have the money yet to pay for that trip, and it's hard to get a job for that specific company. What are the predators for penguins? Like I said before, when adults are in the water, seals, especially the leopard seals that Carlos talked about, and orcas are the main predators. And then for the poor chicks, birds, but number 1 is the skua. I don't know if you remember, but we showed a picture of 2 brown birds that they managed to steal that dead baby penguin from the colony. What's the type of penguin that you can see in Argentina? Well, in Argentina, the largest colony that we have all along the east side of my country, in the region, famous region that is called Patagonia, it's called the Magellanic penguin. But there are some other smaller rookeries in Patagonia as well, where you can see rock hopper penguins, for example.
And the kings.
And no, king penguins in Chile.
On the Chilean side, right?
Yes. And what's the other? David is asking about the person who did a census of the Antarctica penguins, do a census divided by species. I think he did just one for the 5 species that live in Antarctica. But if you want to read more about that guy, part of the material that Mara will be sharing with you is the article from where I got that information. Yeah. And have different species of penguins ever mated with each other? I haven't heard from that.
No.
They stick to their same species.
Yeah, crossbreeding.
They like each other.
They're very loyal to each other, truly.
Yes.
Well, that's amazing. That's awesome. I think that obviously a lot of people are enamored with penguins, and that's a great way to end our virtual tour. So I just want to thank you again, Laura and Carlos. I know it's easy to do a tour in person, and it's very challenging sometimes, especially when you're far away from the land that you're featuring. You came out with wonderful videos and wonderful photos, and we all feel as though we've been touched by Antarctica tonight. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us, because without the audience, this would be nothing. This would be the 3 of us talking to each other. So
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and we will see you again next week.
Yes, thank you so much, Mara. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mara, once again.
See you in 2025.
Yes.
All right. Yes, we will.